The Phoenician Scheme, brought to you by one of our greatest filmmakers in Wes Anderson. And I know the internet can be weird about Wes Anderson sometime, and I just don't still get it. But today we got to just talk about the Phoenician Scheme, the pros, the cons of this movie. I think this movie is very interesting, and I can't wait to get into it and talk about what I liked and didn't like about the Phoenician Scheme. Because even though I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan, I can admit there are some qualities of his films that I'm not always the biggest fan of. And I think the Phoenician Scheme highlights the highs of Wes Anderson with some of the lows that I've been feeling with some of his past few films. Now, I just want to get into this film and talk about a lot of the positives of this movie, because the strengths of this movie far outweigh the negatives that I have on this movie. And I mentioned this, and some of you may have seen my review, or I should say rankings on YouTube yesterday, where I talked about the best Wes Anderson films, and I ranked all 12 of his films. And essentially, I was really thinking and spending a lot of time with Wes Anderson the past 2 weeks. And I just came to the understanding my relationship with Wes Anderson is I like when a filmmaker is itching a scratch that they just can't get over. And like that bug that he has, that whatever that is just keeps him coming back to this idea, works for me. And in this idea, it's very heavy on fatherhood. The Phoenician Scheme is a story about fatherhood, which is basically the premise of every Wes Anderson film. Rushmore is about fatherhood. The Royal Tenenbaums is about fatherhood. Life Aquatic, Darjeeling, Moonrise, Grand Budapest, like even his last film, Asteroid City, like they all have a central story about fatherhood. Some may find that very repetitive. I think the way Wes Anderson explores it is quite fascinating, because we're seeing new layers of fatherhood explored in his films. For instance, in this movie, I think this is a very personal movie of fatherhood, which is specifically, this is the first time that I really felt Wes Anderson acknowledging himself be a father. I think you could actually look at his last few films in French Dispatch, in Asteroid City, and in the Phoenician Scheme, this kind of mini trilogy about fatherhood. And the film French Dispatch, that isn't necessarily about a father, but it is somebody who's fathering this newspaper and has all these people working under him and wanting to make sure they are all set, taken care of. Asteroid City, it's a more literal father in the fact that he is a father grieving the death of his wife. And in this movie, this is a father trying to reconnect with his daughter. That is the core tendency of this movie. And what's so fascinating is to see essentially how it all comes together 20 years, because this has a very similar feeling to the Royal Tenenbaums. In the Royal Tenenbaums, Royal Tenenbaum is this character trying to reestablish a relationship with his children after being essentially a deadbeat father throughout their life. In this movie, it's very similar. However, Wes Anderson is now, I think, more relating to the Benicio del Toro character of fatherhood. So he is now essentially the father figure, which isn't the case of his early filmography. So to see him evolve and to see him take that leap into fatherhood and to explore that, I find that quite interesting. And it's very rewarding in this movie that stars Benicio del Toro, that stars Mia Threppleton, who is the daughter of Kate Winslet. And once you realize that in the movie, it becomes uncanny. Watching the movie, I kept having this feeling of like, I recognize this actress, but I don't know what, and I've never heard this name before. And then when I heard that she's the daughter of Kate Winslet, I'm like, oh, yep, that is definitely Kate Winslet's like face. Like it's kind of the same thing I had with Maya Hawke in Asteroid City, where you're like, oh, you're watching a young Uma Thurman. Like Wes is playing with that. And Mia's really good in this film. We'll talk about her performance. And then the third performer in this film is Michael Cera as Bjorn. We're going to talk a lot about the Cera performance. There's also a huge supporting cast in Riz Ahmed, Tom Hanks, Bryan Cranston, Richard Ayoade, Jeffrey Wright, Scarlett Johansson, Benedict Cumberbatch, plus many, many more. Let's just like focus on some of the issues that I had with the Phoenician Scheme, because I want to just kind of outline where I struggled with this movie at times. And that is, this plot is very messy and very disorganized. It's at times like really hard to follow the Phoenician scheme. So much so that I really would say the first time I watched this movie, I didn't really know what was going on. Like I didn't understand the complexity of the plot. I understood the thematic weight, like I said, of fatherhood, of some of the other stuff that we're about to talk about. In the actual like point A to point B to point C to point D to the ending, like I got pretty lost watching this movie. I don't think it's a very straightforward story, and I think that's actually to the detriment of this movie. Essentially, if I had to kind of describe the plot, I would use the word beneficiaries galore, which is essentially the story of this guy who is trying to get beneficiaries for his enterprise, that he's trying to basically get investors to go along with him. Essentially, this plot follows the character of Jaja Corda, played by Benicio del Toro. He is a businessman, an industrialist, and seemingly an arms dealer as well. Jaja appoints his only daughter, played by Mia, as the sole heir of his estate. And he basically has this vision for a new enterprise, which is known as the Phoenician Scheme. And he essentially needs people to invest in his vision. And so he gets a number of beneficiaries in there. Some of them are tycoons, some of them are terrorists. And then there's a few other characters in here. A dastardly brother, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, is in this movie. You have a few assassins always chasing on him. You have other intervening governments who are trying to get the best of Jaja. And that's kind of the story. It is an espionage in sorts. I would describe this film more as a comedy than an espionage thriller, but it certainly has some of those whims of a espionage thriller. But ultimately, this is a guy who's going on this globe-trotting adventure to basically get people to invest in his enterprise. And along the way, people are trying to kill him and get the better of him. And that's where all these characters played by Riz Ahmed, Tom Hanks, Bryan Cranston, Richard Ayoade, all these guys kind of come in as figures who are essentially trying to have this negotiation / relationship with the Jaja character. And then he has his daughter, which again played by Mia. Her name is Sister Liesel. She is this estranged daughter who is in this studying to become a nun. And he basically promises her to be the sole heir of his estate. And then you also have this Michael Cera character, Yorn, who is the tutor. He is somebody that the Jaja character basically hires because Jaja is this man of culture and of the world, and he wants to have this new understanding of insects. And this Yorn character is somebody well-versed in insects. Let's just talk about this. My favorite performance by far of the movie. I literally texted somebody after watching this movie where I'm like, Michael Cera is quite literally like LeBron 2018 Game 1 Finals, 50 plus points. This guy was on one in this movie. I'm a huge Michael Cera fan, and sometimes I don't think he works in films. That's not the case for this movie. He delivers in this movie tenfold. What he does in this movie is easy. And I talked about like 50 points. Like, this is a guy who could have gone more. You could have put more of the movie on his back and he would have delivered. Like, this is a monumentous performance from Michael Cera. He's so funny. He's so charismatic. It's such a fun character to spend time with. Like, he quite literally, if the movie was completely a disaster and he was still at the forefront of this movie, I would still watch this movie multiple times. Like, that's how good of a performance Michael Cera is delivering as the character of Yorn in this movie. And he has great relationship with the other two characters played by Del Toro and played by Threppleton. And he essentially has this relationship with the Lysol character. And you start to see this relationship evolve, and then like there's twists and turns in there. I just think Sarah's completely game for this. Like, quite literally, like I said, besides texting my friends that, like, right now, the past few days, like, the three most important people in my life are like young Julio on the Giants, Brock Purdy, and Michael Cera as Yorn. This is going to be one of my favorite performances of 2025. No questions. Like, I can almost pencil this in as going to make my top 10 performances of the year. He's stupendous in this movie. He's so funny. And there's a turn with this character where there's a reveal, and The comedic beat that he hits in this movie is one of the hardest I've laughed in a while. I loved everything Sarah is doing in this movie. That's not to denigrate the other actors in this movie. Del Toro as Zsa Zsa is really good in this movie. He is the steadfast presence in this movie. I think some people are going to be maybe a little turned off by the Del Toro subtlety that this character is giving. This is such a performance that he plays straight. He is not going for laughs, but everything he says is very funny. He has this kind of reoccurring joke that he talks about where I forget exactly the line, but he's like, I myself feel perfectly safe in like the most dangerous situations as everyone around him clearly does not feel safe. He is very steadfast funny in this movie in a way that he's not overcommitting to a joke. He's delivering on every sense of subtlety in this. And I think he has a really good relationship with Mia's character in this movie as well. And you feel like this kind of regret of this father kind of like coming to a realization that maybe he's not a great father and like what that means and how that's going to impact his life. Now, I talked about this movie being in this kind of trilogy with French Dispatch, with Asteroid City, and now this movie, The Phoenician Scheme. I think that's true. I think there is a father figure ideals that are throughout these three movies, a thematic weight to them that feel different than the rest of Wes Anderson's movies. I will also say, I think this is a movie that directly deals with Wes Anderson being an artist, which is something that I really felt about in his last three movies upon my rewatches of all of them. Essentially, there is a center point of this movie that you could really focus on the shenanigans of the rich, which is kind of like something that co-aligns with artistry. And it's this balance between the rich and artist and how they kind of need one another in this weird tango they are in. The shenanigans of the rich, and it's also like the collusions going on. This movie is funny enough, like a movie that I found prescient in the sense that like this movie feels like it's about tariffs and like enterprise in that way. If not tariffs, then it's driving up the prices of building material is like a very center idea of this movie, which is like, I think on a lot of people's minds right now in Hollywood, but like more specifically, like getting back to this idea of a story of the now and like this relationship between artist and capitalist is like something that he's really exploring in all of these. Like French Dispatch is a movie about running a newspaper and like wanting to make sure you're making a profit, but defending your writers. And then like Asteroid City is a movie about the making of a play, what goes into that. And then like specifically like The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, which is the Netflix mini movie that he makes that ends up winning him his Oscar, is a movie about a guy who basically learns how to have all the wealth in the world. And right when he obtains that, he's just kind of disgusted by himself and just like donates it all and like becomes like Mr. like charity. And like, this is like a central idea in a lot of these movies, especially like this late post-COVID filmography that we're having from Wes Anderson, having all the money in the world and what that means. And, you know, I learned this from Sean Fennessy on The Big Picture, something I didn't know, like all of Wes Anderson's previous work since I think like Moonrise Kingdom in 2012, they are all financed by this billionaire, Stephen Rails, who some of you may know him. He is one of the big investors in the Criterion Closet. He's also an owner of the Indiana Pacers. So like, you know, this idea of this billionaire actually devoting a lot of his money and resources to helping out artists and ensuring their movie legacy was just an incredible project that the Criterion Closet is doing. That's also like all in the Phoenician Scheme, because this is a movie about capitalists and investors and benefactories and the role of what they do, the public goods that they do, what it means to have wealth, what it means to use your wealth. Those are all core tendencies within this movie. I think you can enjoy these all as themes of this movie, and I also don't think you need to think that hard of this movie to enjoy it, because this is a very silly movie from Wes Anderson, and it's his most conventional silly movie in a while. I would say this movie has the most structural similarity to a film like The Grand Budapest Hotel. Now, I don't think this is as strong as The Grand Budapest Hotel, but this is a far more conventional outing from Wes Anderson. This is very straightforward, especially when you compare that to The French Dispatch and Asteroid City. There are some structural ideas that Wes Anderson is doing and playing with the format and storytelling and making this feel like a script slash play come to life. All of those tendencies of Wes Anderson are within the Phoenician Scheme, but ultimately this is a story told linear of a man trying to get his enterprise funding and also going on this journey with his daughter. It's a very straightforward movie in that. And while watching it the first time, that's what I took away from it. Like the ins and outs, like I said, the plot A to plot B to plot C to plot D, like everything that happens in this movie, like I got a little muddled on. The overall story I understood pretty easily, and I think that is going to be cause for a lot of enjoyment for people. There are things in this movie, if you're not on board for with the Wes Anderson style, especially the style of really the past 10 years, it may be too much of a bother for you. Like there is a very idiosyncratic nature to this movie. There is a very real stillness that Wes Anderson has been exploring as a filmmaker. There is a huge level of subtlety, and there is like a very heavy emphasis on the color palette. There is a huge style of this movie that feels in line with everything Wes has really been like achieving since the Grand Budapest Hotel. If you haven't been on board for his last few movies, I could very much see this movie being grating in the same way that some of his past few movies have been. If you've been on board, then I think you're going to really enjoy this movie, and I think it's another really clever outing from Wes Anderson. And I would encourage people, because I do think this is a far more conventional story from Wes Anderson, to seek it out even if you've struggled with some of his past few films. I think this is a nice blend between some of the earlier qualities of Wes Anderson's work and some of the nature of his latest few films. Like I said, there is this balance. This is one that I felt like really commentated on the themes of his first few films while also taking a lot of the stylistic choices that Wes Anderson has made in his past few films. Like, I think there is a nice, healthy balance of both, and I would really encourage everyone to see this movie. I quite enjoyed The Phoenician Scheme. This is a movie I'm definitely going to see multiple times. Like I said, there are problems with this movie. I wanted to shout out before I leave because I forgot about them real quick. Like, all the supporting performances are typically really good. I think Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston's scene in this movie, they have like this kind of quick scene in this movie playing basketball. It's one of the funniest things I've seen in a movie in a while as well. Like, that is another joke that just really lands. Specifically, Bryan Cranston, the character design that he plays in this movie. Like, this guy wearing, I think it's a Stanford, like, tight shirt. I think he's wearing shorts. Like, it's an extremely just comedically committed performance from both Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston. That's the charm of Wes Anderson that I really, really like. I'm totally on board for. I'm really curious because his next movie is supposedly going to be starring Richard Ayoade. So I'm really curious to see what that looks like. I think Richard is another of these actors that just understands the style. Nobody like right now understands the style better than Jeffrey Wright. I think Jeffrey Wright is just absolutely one of the best actors that Wes Anderson has to deliver his sensibilities and dialogue. But either way, The Phoenician Scheme, this is a recommendation from me for sure, and I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. So thank you everyone who watched this video. Just as an FYI, I'll have a few reviews coming out soon. I have Predators, Killers of Killers coming out. I have The Life of Chuck. I have Materialist. I'm going to hopefully do a Dogma review. Make sure to check out my Wes Anderson rankings, which you can find on my YouTube channel below. Subscribe to my channel, do all that, and let me know what you thought of The Phoenician Scheme in my comment section below.